Welcome, everyone. As we learn Torah Hashem, as Hashem Yisbarach, as always, we begin with appreciation to TorahAnytime.com for their worldwide platform to be Marbitz Torah. Equally appreciative to Coalition for their global network, to Torah Communications Network, YouTube, our Zoomers, our subscribers, and those of you that are joining us here in our flagship station at Eglis Shobezev of Fairways Lakewood. We are very grateful to our very special sponsors this evening. We have a diamond sponsorship by my dear Talmud Ari Presser and his lovely family in honor of this year and for the well-being of all of Klal Yisrael. We're also sponsored by a subscriber of mine who I also had the pleasure of meeting personally more than once, the pleasure of spending Shabbos in his community in Silver Springs, Mr. and Mrs. Barry Graham, dedicated subscriber for decades, and he's sponsoring this year for that Hashem should give complete gesund and menuchas hanefesh to his entire family with atzach and ruchnius and gashmias. And Moshe Katz also wants to wish everything good for the schus of Klal Yisrael. Baruch Shechianu v'kiyamanu v'gyanu lezman hazeh, to speak about the wonderful time of Chanuka, the wonderful time of the year for Klal Yisrael. We know that there's a famous levush that most people are aware of, that the celebration of Chanuka and Purim is markedly different because the threat was different. So on Purim, where our lives were threatened with annihilation, Haman wanted lahashmid, larog, la'abed es kol Yehudim, right? To destroy, to kill, and to utterly cause to perish all the Jews. So our very life, our physical bodies were threatened. So therefore we celebrate with Mishta v'Simcha, with body ways of drinking and eating. On Chanukah, on the other hand, says the Levush, the Yevanim were not interested in annihilating us. The Yevanim were interested in assimilating us. They were interested in Hellenizing us. So it was a threat of a spirit. And therefore, since it was a spiritual threat, so therefore we celebrate in a spiritual way with Hallel and Haidah. And these two dangers, these two types of persecutions have haunted us throughout the ages. Whether it was the difference between Haman wanted lahashmid, larog, la'abeid, and Lavan, who said to Yaakov, habanim banai and banais banaisai, let's all be one big family. Yaakov didn't want that. Right? Yaakov didn't want that he should be exposed to the truffim and to the promiscuity of Lavan. And this is the stark difference between Germany and Western culture. Germany wanted that it should be Yud and Rein. There should be not one Jew left, with gas chambers and all types of Babi Yars, Rachmana litzlan lo yaleinu, and Western culture who wants to just absorb us into the melting pot of America and make us just good Americans. And there are, in what we call the silent Holocaust, millions of Jews that this happened to, that they're washing their cars on Yom Kippur, and they're eating pasta on Pesach, and they have a Christmas tree in their window. Unfortunately, today, as we live right now, we are exposed to both of these threats. Indeed, Yaakov said it according to the Beis HaLevi, Hatzileni na miyad ochi miyad Esav. Save me if he acts like my brother, because I don't want to learn from him, and save me when he's the murderous Esav. And today, we have both. We have Jews that we are losing to the pleasures of the world, who cannot live without a cell phone on Shabbos or a television on Shabbos, who cannot live without indulging in the myriad of non-kosher restaurants. And then we're losing Jews in Sydney, Australia. We're losing Jews October 7th. We're losing, so we have with us today both threats. However, let's zoom in a little bit closer on the powerful, powerful messages of Chanukah. In the Gemara in Shabbos, on Daf Chav Beis Amid Beis, the Gemara says, "My Chanukah." What's Chanukah? What exactly are we celebrating? So the Gemara says, "Kishenichnasu Yavanim laheichel," when the Syrian Greeks entered into the temple, "Timu kol hashmanim." They deliberately contaminated all the repository of the special oil for the menorah. Oil for the menorah was shemen zayit zach, chosis l'ma'or, specially pressed for the lighting. And when they came to light the menorah, matzu rak pach echad, they found only one jar, b'chaysamay shel kohen gadol, with the seal, the stamp of kashrus of the kohen gadol, and v'lo yayel yom echad, it wasn't enough to light only one day. And in order to import new oil from Tekoa, which was a trip of 4 days there and 4 days back, because they didn't have a cell phone, didn't have a phone, they needed 8 days. And Nas and Nes, and a miracle happened that it lit L'ches Yom. L'shana Acheres, the next year, Kavam, they enacted V'asu Yom Tov B'halal V'haidah. And they made it a Yom Tov with praise and thanks. So the obvious question is, we know that Chanukah means Chanu Chafei. We rested on the 25th. We know that the Syrian Greeks had an army of Olympian might. Olympian might. Now, the Jewish people at that time did not have an army. There was no IDF. There was no training. One family of Kohanim, led by Yehuda Maccabee and Yochanan, fought and defeated the Olympian Syrian Greek army. We would think that would be Chanukah, especially since it's embedded in the word Chanu Chafei. We rested on the 25th, right? We rested from the threat, and yet that's not the explanation. The explanation is it was because of a miracle that one jar of oil, which is supposed to light for 1 day, lasted for 8 days. It's a little bit strange. In Al Anisim, in our davening, we talk about that. We talk about Rabbim Biyad Ma'atim, the many in the hands of the few, right? We talk about Tmeim Biyad Tahirim, those that are defiled in the hands of those that are pure. Zaydim Biyad Aiskei Saresecha, those that were willful in the hands of those that learn Torah. But the Gemara says that that's not the institution of Hanukkah. The Gemara says the institution of Hanukkah is because one jar of oil lasted for 8 days. Now that's a pretty nice miracle. But if I told you that the American army decided to come and wipe out Lakewood, and one Chabura in Lakewood came and destroyed the American army, that's a little bit more than, lighting a jar of oil in 8 days instead of 1 day. So it's a little bit strange, wouldn't you say? Now, even though we all know that there's a famous question that if we had enough for 1 day, so then the miracle wasn't 8 days, the miracle was only 7 days, because we had enough for 1 day. And there's literally a sefer that gives us 100 answers to that question. And Ner Lameya, just the finding of that jar was a miracle, because normally the Kohen Gadol didn't put a seal on a jar. And some say they put an eighth in each lamp, so it was a miracle even the first day. Some say that in order for there to be a miracle, there has to be some oil. Miracle doesn't happen on nothing. So there had to be left from the first day a little bit for a miracle to happen on the second day. So it didn't burn fully on the first day. That's also a miracle. Ramosha says just the fact that oil burns is a miracle. Many answers to this question. Many answers. One of my own answers to this question, which I think is a beautiful thought, is that we know that Misa Tzadikim is Mechaper al Adar. And we all know the story of Chana v'Shiva Baneha. Chana and her 7 children. Right? That Antiochus wanted them to bow down, and they didn't bow down, and he killed them one after another until the smallest child, and he said, look, I'll drop my ring, and you'll pick it up. I'll drop my ring on the ground, and you'll pick it up, and you'll say that you bow down. And he said, silly king, you're worried about your pride. Shh.
Rabbi, you froze in the last moment.
You're worried. You're worried about your pride, right? And he killed that child. And then Chana said, tell Avram when you meet him that he offered 1 child, I offered all 7 of my children, and she also gave up her life. Oh, what's happening here? She also gave up her life. And I always felt that Chana v'Shiva Banel were the Anne Frank of Hanukkah. Anne Frank was one girl. There were over 1 million children. But the mind can't grasp 1 million children. The mind grasps the plight of Anne Frank and then multiplies it. But we also know that there's such a concept of Misa Tzadikim is Mechaper al Adar. And I always thought, at least in a symbolic way, the 8 candles was a yahrzeit candles for Chana and her 7 children, which brought about the Yeshua. There's some that say that it can't be 7 days, because then it would be a menorah of 7, and we don't want to make a menorah like the menorah in the Beis Hamikdash, which had 7 lamps. So that's why it's 8 days. There are many answers. But the Meiri, it's known as the Pri Chodesh's answer, because at that time we didn't have the Meiri. But the Meiri and the Pri Chodesh say that the first night we celebrate the victory of the war. And the other nights is that it lit instead of one night, 7 more nights. That's nice, but that's not the Gemara here says that the 8 days was because of the miracle of the oil. Why? Why not for the miracle of the victory, which sounds like a much more stupendous miracle? So we know that the Kedushas Levi asks 2 more questions. The Heilige Kedushas Levi, the Heilige Bedicheva, Zechet Tzadik L'Vracha Zechus Yagan Aleinu. He says, why do we celebrate Hanukkah and not other amazing miracles that happen throughout our checkered history? The miracle of Gideon and Sisra, the miracle of Chizkiah and Sancherib. I mean, that miracle of Chizkiah and Sancherib. Sancherib came with 400,000 generals, each leading legions, and Chizkiah did not have an army. And that night, before Sancherib came to completely pulverize Jerusalem, Hashem allowed Sancherib's army to hear the singing of the angels, and they all died. Millions of people died. It was an amazing miracle, but we don't even have a day about that. I mean, we should have, the celebration of the fall of Sancherib. I mean, now some might tell you that Gideon, Sisra, Sancherib, Chizkiah happened on Pesach, but that's not enough, because the hanging of Haman also happened on the second night of Pesach. Yet we have a Purim. So the Kedushas Levi says, why do we celebrate Hanukkah especially? And then he asks another question. He says, the Gemara says, L'shana acheres kovam v'asim yom tev'ala u'vayda. The next year they made it a festival. So the Kedushas Levi says, why next year? Why didn't they declare it right then and there? It's a miracle. Look at what happened with the oil. They should have declared it right there. Next year we're going to have a festival. They waited to the next year. Why? So here we have a unique Jewish idea about time. Time is not a straight line. Time is a spiral. We use the same time every year, the same fabric of time. That's why we say in the bracha, the second bracha, she'asa nisim laviseinu, you made miracles for our forefathers by Yomim Haim in those days, bazman hazeh, with this fabric of time. And therefore we know that certain fabric of time, every year when it comes around, has special koiches, special powers. Like, for example, Elul is a time of introspection and tshuva. Adar is a time of good mazel. Av, until the 15th of Av, is a time of bad mazel. So the Kedushas Levi said they wanted to wait till the next year because they had the sensitivity to test the fabric of time, to see if there's something special in the time. By Sancherib, there wasn't something special in the time. By Gideon and Sisra, there wasn't something special in the time. They came around the next year, and on the 25th of Kislev, they said, there's something eternal here. And they knew what it was. And it wasn't a miracle. It wasn't what Hashem wanted to remember, the miracle against the Syrian Greeks. It was something else. It was Halal Vahidah. It was a time of Jewish thanksgiving. That was in the time. And the Bnei Yissaschar says even more. They weren't sure. They thought maybe it should start on the 26th. because on the 25th they had the 1 jar of oil. But they already felt it on the 25th. And they felt that the celebration was, as the Levush says, it was a spiritual danger, and which is more than the physical danger. The spiritual danger is forever. And therefore they saw that the spiritual celebration was to be one of Hallel and Haidah and thanks, right? Hallel and davening, ala nisim, and of course the expression of thanks of the candles, like we say in Aneris Halala, right? Ein al rishus l'shtamis behem el l'roisim b'vad k'dei l'hoidos u'l'halal l'shimcha agol. The lighting of the candles is an expression of thanks to Hashem. However, it begs a different question. We're just getting started here. It begs a different question. The Levush says it was a spiritual danger. But what was the spiritual danger? What do we say in Alanisim? La'ashkicham Torah, to cause us to forget the Torah. La'avira meichukei ritzainecha. Ramila writes from the Medrash that if a woman would circumcise her child, they would then take the child, tie it to the woman, march her through the streets, and then burn her alive with the child. They tried to stamp out Shabbos. They forbade Torah learning, the whole legend of the dreidel, that children would surreptitiously learn, but when the inspectors would come, they would whip out the dreidel and play the dreidel. They tried to stamp out learning, lashkicham Torah, to cause us to forget the Torah. If that's the case, then I know if I was enacting Chanukah, I would have enacted 8 days of intensive learning. 8 days of Yarchei Kala. 8 days where we make extra classes. We meet in the mornings. Right? We take off time from work and make study sessions. Wouldn't that be? It doesn't make sense that, after all, the Ar, we know, Kiner Mitzvah V'Torah Ar. The Ar represents Torah. We know that the Gemara tells us Haragel B'Ner, one who is accustomed with Ner, being careful with the neighbors of Chanukah. Have you not Banim Talmidei Chachamim? We see the reward is Torah. So why was the emphasis on Hallel and Haidah? Why wasn't the emphasis on Torah? So I found this kasha. I was gratified because it bothered me very much. I found this kasha in the Maral, and I found this kasha in the Pachad Yitzchak by Rav Hutner. Zechet Tzadikim V'Kedoshim L'Brachas Chusim Yagim Aleinu. The Maral says that Chochmah was found by the Syrian Greeks as well. It wasn't only hedonism. It wasn't only apiktoisin, that they ate and then they stuck their finger in their mouths in order they should be able to enjoy eating more. It wasn't only that they played in the gymnasiums unclothed to celebrate the body and to engage in the most promiscuous and lewd lifestyle. Their Greek gods crafted to have every vice so that they could be like their gods and not be ashamed. The Greeks had knowledge too. They had Aristotle. They had Socrates. They had knowledge. But they had knowledge, but it was knowledge seichel anushis. It was human knowledge. It was not divine knowledge. That's what they were trying to stamp out. That there's a divine knowledge. That there's a right way. And therefore we needed to connect the dots. We needed Hallel and Haidah. We needed to sing and to thank, and Haidah means to admit. We needed to admit that Torah is min hashamayim. We had to connect the dots. As Rav Hutner adds, knowledge is not about accomplishment, right? Advancement of knowledge and accomplishment. Knowledge is to learn the Ritzayin Hashem. And to do that, they enacted that it should be a time of Hallel and Haidah, of praising and admitting to the divine, to the Rabbeinu Shalom. I want to add a different answer. You see, much of the Jewish population were already unfortunately misyavnin. They were already unfortunately gone. The beauty of the culture, the pleasure of the culture, won them over. Especially since they're learning, their religiosity had become dry. Remember, Haman HaRasha said to Achashverosh, Yeshnoi am echad. And the Medrash says, the Gemara Megillah says, Yeshnoi means Yesheinim ein min ha-mitzvahs, they're sleeping. And as the Mefarshim explained, it doesn't mean that they did it in their sleep. It means they did it like they were sleeping. They put on tefillin like it was a blood pressure cuff. They had a mezuzah, they gave it not a moment's thought. They had Shabbos, but it was about how good the kishka was and how good the single malt scotch is. That kind of a religiosity is not going to grab them and save them from the claws, from the grips, from the magnetism of the Olympian beauty of Yafteli Kimli Yefes, of the beauty of Yefes. You know, what we see in the Olympics is only a remnant of that which was gorgeous, that which was seductive, of the beauty of Greece. And we weren't up to combating them. The Torah couldn't grab us. A Taisus couldn't grab us. We were too far gone. They needed the fireworks. They came and they took the oil which they were taught represents the Torah. And Hashem made a national miracle that everybody saw. The national miracle woke them up. That woke them up. Wow. We're seeing this today. We're seeing that 631 missiles were shot from Iran, and the Iron Dome and the David Slingshot, all these machines have a very big margin of error. There was no error. Of the 631 missiles, only 30 landed in Israel, and most of them in open fields. A lot of thinking people got the message from that. They weren't attracted by the Torah. There's a story on October 7th that a family said, I will not have a mezuzah on my house. They did not have a mezuzah in their house, and then they were miraculously saved. And then they got a mezuzah. The reason why we celebrate the Yom Tov with Hallel and Hoidah is because the Torah wasn't able to win them back. It needed the miracle of Chanukah. And when we point out to the non-Haredi Jew the miracles that happened in the tunnels, the miracles that happen on a regular basis with missiles being shot to Sderot, and just missing schools, and just missing apartment buildings, that brings people back. That's the holiday of Al Anisim. But we have to go even deeper. It's true that one family of Kahanim defeated the military might of the Olympian Syrian Greeks. But as I said, this miracle is only a miracle of this world. We know that there are 36 lights. Right? If you count 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, it's 36. The Rekeach, who is a Rishon, says that he knows from Eliyahu that the 36 lights represents the 36 hours that Adam and Chava enjoyed the Oragonas, the hidden light, until they were kicked out of Gan Eden, because they were there for Friday, and the 24 hours on Shabbos, there's no dark in Shabbos in Gan Eden. And the Rekeach says that when we look at the candles of the menorah, the Oragonas is revealed. Rabbi Elimelech Biderman says that the Bnei Yissaschar says that there's 3 great Eidim, 3 great witnesses that the Aragonas is revealed in the candles. He says the Rekeach, the Maral, and Rab Pinchas Mikaritz. He says he has it from 3 big, the Heilige Bnei Yissaschar, the Heilige Dinaver, Zechel Tzadik Kodesh Baruch Hu Aleinu, says he has it from 3 very good witnesses that the light of the eternal light, remember I told you this many times, Hashem gave us a world with such pleasure, and He didn't hold anything back from the 70 nations. They could have the pleasure of a beautiful woman. They could have the pleasure of music. They could have the pleasure of a sunset. They could have the pleasures of spirits and food. They could have the pleasures of the sea and the expanses of the mountains. They could have it all. But Vayara Elikim es ha'or ki tov vayavdel. Hashem saw that the light was good, vayavdel, and he separated, Rashi says, he separated it and he put it in the next world because it was too good for the wicked. The only pleasure that was too good for the wicked was the Oragonas. And says the Pinchas Mikaritz, says the Maral, says the Rekeach, in the name of Eliyahu Navi, revealed in the lights of the menorah are the Oragonas. That's why people sit and stare, tzaddikim, sit and stare at the lights of the menorah. What's happening over here? What's happening? The Arizal says that when we light the menorah, Srafim and Malachim come down. Fiery angels and Malachim come down. It seems to be that by looking at the light of the menorah, one can wake up, one can be misorer, one can ignite, one can inflame internal strivings. It's a very big challenge. We live on a world where, as the Medrash says, Choshech ze Yavan. Darkness is Yavan. Darkness is Yavan. Yavan was not dark at all. Remember, I was surprised once that Rav Miller mentioned the Oscars. By the Goyim, there are shining nights like the Oscars, the Golden Globes. It's shining. It's beautiful. It's magnetic. Says the Medrash, it's dark. Yavan, remember Yavan is Yud Vav Nun spells Noi. That's dark. Why is that dark? Because here's a boy. He goes out with a girl. She has, excuse the expression, a visceral sexiness. She's extremely beautiful. He marries her. And she makes him miserable till his dying day because she was a self-centered, narcissistic person. Her beauty was darkness. It's darkness. It blinded him. That's the beauty of Yavan. That's the lure of this world. The lure of this world. We're hearing that people are in the throes of gambling addictions, alcohol addictions, gaming addictions, pornography addictions. The glow is darkness. Chazal tell us that this month is Kislev. Kislev is Kais Lamed Vav. 36 cups. That's the 36 cups of oil that has an eternal message. Looking at them, says Reb Pinchas Mikaritz, the Maral, the Rekeach, in the name of Eliyahu, quoted by the Heilige B'nai Yissaschar, there is a power, lahalhiv, to inflame us. See, this is much more than celebrating the war. It's much more. It's to wake us up not to miss the eternal. Tells us that Chanukah is hinted in the beginning of the Torah. And it says, Vayara lekim es ha'or. The word ha'or is the 25th word in the Torah. So it hints to the festival of lights, which will be on the 25th day of Kislev. But then it says, Vayara lekim es ha'or ki toiv. On the letter tes in the word toiv, there are 4 crowns. Tes is 9, times 4 is 36. And you're left with a vav and a vase. The vav and the vase is 6 and 2 is 8. We break it up into 2 parts, says the Bnei Yissaschar, because base 2 days are special. The first day when we say a Shechianu, this last day, which is Zos Chanukah, the Gemar Din, and then the other 6. It's interesting that, I've always talked to you about the hints in the word Bereshis. Right? Ba'alef Tishrei, Rashi Tavai, Amen Yesh Merabah B'Kol Tefillah, Ben Rishon Achar Shloshim Yomim Tifteh, Yorei Shabbos, Yorei Boshes. And there's the Bnei Yissaschar wrote a sefer. He says that there's actually, it's really, really, very, very, very interesting. He says there's 720 messages embedded in the word Bereshis. He writes 720 messages. 2 of them are about Chanukah. He says Bereshis stands for these, this is an acronym. Yeshua Rabba Tia Bizman Shemolach Antiochus. Those are the letters of Bereshis. Yeshua Gedalah, great salvation will come when Antiochus reigns. He says also Bereshis is an acronym of Yeshua Rabba Tiu Sheinatzchu B'nei Aaron. But I'm straying from my message over here. The 36 lights. These 36 lights are supposed to awaken us not to be compared to the huge Christmas tree at Rockefeller Center. Not to be compared to the houses that have thousands of colors and reindeer and nativity scenes. The 36 candles have in them a power to awaken us to that which is eternal about life. Looking at the candles, one should think it's a big drill. Look at the candles and say, what do I do that is eternal? Sitting up with my Gemara, even when I'm tired, helping my wife, helping my husband, giving money that's hard-earned to charity. That's what the Oragonas is supposed to awaken in us. What do I do that's eternal? How do I connect with Hashem? Do I make my Shabbos a day of Kedusha? That's what the candles are supposed to awaken and stir in us. It's interesting that it's brought down that the 36 candles stand for something else. The 36 candles stand for the 36 Mesechtas in Shas. It's 36 Mesechtas in Shas. You see, Chanuka celebrates Torah Shebaal Peh, the oral law. The Chassam Sofer explains that really a goy cannot be metame tumazov midoraisa. The Rabbanan made that a goy should have the tumah of a zav only because they wanted us to separate ourselves from the goy. Right? It's the whole message of anti-assimilation. Biblically, the oil was able to be used. The fact that Hashem made the miracle shows that Hashem was saying the miracle was necessary because the oral law is true. And therefore the 36 candles represent the oral law, which by the way is consistent with the idea of the Oragonas. Because what will be the eternal light? What do we say? Ashrei mi shebalakan. Fortunate is someone who comes to the next world with Talmudai biyadai, with his Mesechtas in his hand. You could look at a light. You could look at one light and say that that's Mesechtas Brachas. And another light is Mesechtas Shabbos. And another light is Mesechtas Erevin. You can look at a light and you say, you know what, I'm learning now, this light is my Zvachim. You could say, wow, this light I'm learning now in the Mishnah Yomis Becharis. That's the 36 lights. And that's eternity. It's interesting that the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Zeich Tzadik L'Vracha, Zchus Yagan Aleinu, Lubavitcher Rebbe says that in Mikvois it mentions Tit Yovan. Tit Yovan is clay, is mud. He says that's Greek wisdom. Water is Torah. Emayim ala Torah. But when you mix it with the earth of materialism, when you mix it with the earth of hedonism, that becomes mud. That was Yavan. That's mud. Ours is light. So the Aragonas should think they're looking at the menorah, just not stamazai looking at the lights, and look at the lights and say, okay, so I know my enjoyment of a latte is not eternal. I know my sleeping is not eternal. I know my steak is not eternal. There's nothing wrong with these things if they help us learn better. I like a latte, I like a steak, I like to sleep. But that's not eternal. I'm looking at the candles that represent the Aragonas, the 36 hours that Adam and Chava had in Gan Eden. The eternal light. What's eternal? or the time I spend with Zvachim, that's eternal. When I take something out of my wallet and give it, when I give to my shul and make it beautiful, when I am not self-centered, but I'm about chesed, and chesed starts at home. Oh, that's eternal. But let's take it one step further. Before I do, I again want to thank my sponsors, Barry Graham, for the gesund of his whole mishpacha, diamond sponsor, Ari Presser, wishing a Chanuka Sameach to ganz Klal Yisrael, Mish Katz, for the best of Klal Yisrael. My dear Talmud, Berit Goldwasser, should have gesund for his whole mishpacha. If you would like to sponsor a share, it's heard all over the world on many different gateways. 718-916-3100, 718-916-3100, rmmwsi@aol.com. There's a famous Vilna Gaon. The Gaon says, we just heard that the Aragonis is a pleasure that is way beyond any pleasure that we can imagine. We can imagine, we have good imaginations. Today, because of advertising, we're exposed to all kinds of pleasures. Pleasures of travel, all kinds of pleasures, gastronomic, all kinds of pleasures. Aragonis trumps them all. So the Gaon says, what do we have to do to get the Aragonis? And the Gaon is a stunning Gaon. He says you don't have to do anything. All you have to do is make sure not to do something. It's really an amazing thing. He says for every moment that we avoid speaking Lashon Hara, we will merit the Aragonis. Isn't that an astounding thing? Now, if you're a thinking person and you hear this Gaon, it will cause a light bulb. Wow! It must be very hard not to speak Lashon Hara. You don't get rewards for easy things. You get rewards for easy things. Itaka must be very difficult. You know, Chanukah is a time of Chanukah parties. Chanukah parties could bring out the worst in any family. Why do you make it this time? You know that's a hard time for me. You don't care that I have to go to the other part of the family, my husband's part of my family, my wife's part of my family. You love them more than me. Why did you serve that? You know that I'm on a diet. You didn't pay any attention to my children. You only paid, you have favorites. Whoa! Parties? Think that's a coincidence? Yeah, we look at the candles, the Aragonis, it's supposed to drive home a message. And I want to tell you, the Chafetz Chaim made famous this pasuk. You see it in the pasuk. Mio ish Chafetz Chaim, oyev yamim lirois tov. You want to see the good? What does it mean, the good? Vayar lekim esa or ki tov. Esa or, that's the Aragonis. Ki tov. Mi ha'isha chavetz chaim ha'yiv yamin l'reis taiv. Nitzar l'shayncha me'ra. Guard your tongue from evil. That's another thing. You look at the candles, the araganas, and you say, I can't afford to talk bad about people. Oy, but we're so righteously indignant. But this person really wronged me. Yeah. That makes it Lashon Hara. If he didn't wrong you, then it wouldn't be Lashon Hara, it would be Moitzi Shemra. Lashon Hara is only when it's true. But it's still Lashon Hara, Lamed Hey, go to Gehenna the easy way. You want to hear a fabulous thing? Fabulous thing. It's I told you the Chachamim are Ikrei Seifrim. They're called counters. Ala Nisim has 108 words. Gehenna. Gehenna. Spelled with Yud. Gimel Yud. It's Gehinam. Is 108. Says in Yisachar. Lashon Hara, Lamed Hey, go to Gehenna. He doesn't say that. Go to Gehenna the easy way. Anisim reminds us not to fall into Gehenna. There are many secrets. There are many secrets. I gave a shir, we called it Chanuka Potpourri. It's on TorahAnytime.com, where we talked about what the term Maccabee stands for. There are many selections. Maccabee could be spelled Mem Kuf Beis Yud, and then it meant Yehuda the hammer. But most spell Maccabee with a chaf. And it stands for different things, Maccabee. If you do, Yud is Hashem, right? So it could stand for Baruch Kvod Hashem Im Kaimai. It could stand for Matisyo ben Yochanan Koyen. But in the order Maccabee, and the most famous explanation is that it stands for Micha Moicha Be'elim Hashem, who is like you amongst the mighty Hashem, giving, of course, all the might. The idea of Jewish warriors is they didn't attribute any credit to themselves. Right? That's why the Mogen David was the six-sided star, because it stands for Echad L'Malav, Echad L'Matav, Daled Ruchais. David went to battle knowing that it wasn't him, it was the one who was above, below, and the four directions. So Maccabee stands for, and it's not us. It's not our elephants. It's Micha Moicha Be'elam Hashem. But listen, look now, we put the message. We're talking about Lashon Hara. Gemara tells us that when the wicked Titus went into the Beis Hamikdash and defiled it, he took his sword and he slashed the paroiches, the curtains. And Hashem made a miracle and the curtains bled. And Titus said he slayed God. And nothing happened. So it says in the Gemara, Micha Moicha Be'elim Hashem, Micha Moicha Be'ilmim Hashem, who is like you amongst the mute, that you hear your disgrace and you're quiet. You want to hear something? Can't make this up. Elaine, to be mute, is Gematria 71. Hagonuz is 71. The Gemara tells us, what should be a person's trade in this world? Yasa atzmoy ki'ilain. Learn how to be quiet. Learn how to be quiet. Somebody did something to you and it's mamish coming out of you to share it with your friend. Could you believe it? Could you believe the nerve? And by venting it, you feel better. Until you get into Gehenna. But by being an Elaine, you get Haganas. So we're going to train ourselves. We're going to look at the lights of the menorah, and we're going to challenge ourselves. What eternal pursuit could I add to my day? What eternal pursuit? How could I help my spouse in a new way? Where could I give some of my hard-earned money that I haven't been giving? How could I add some extra tillim? We're going to sing in the next world. Melech Biderman says, you're looking at the Araganas and you're sitting by the menorah and you're saying Yoshe B'Seisa 7 times. You're saying Kapitel Kuf Yates. Wow! You're really getting the message of the candles. You look at those candles and say, which Masechta am I working on? It's 36 Masechtas. And you look at the Araganas and say, I want that eternal light. I want that which is better than anything that this world has to offer. Yes, it's bigger than the shining displays. It's bigger than the World's Fairs, the expos, the huge stadiums. It's bigger. I'm going to make sure I'm not going to talk bad about other people. That's making a Chanukah a Chanukah. I want to thank all of you for joining me and wish everybody a truly inspirational, happy, and wonderful Chanukah.